Have you ever experienced a moment so unexpected it felt like something out of a movie? For Marcelo Vasconcelos, this feeling has become part of his routine since the tragic loss of his wife, Renata Duarte. 2 years of trying to recover after a car accident that left her body unrecognizable. 2 years of living with grief, caring for his young daughter alone, and trying to convince himself that life had to go on. It was supposed to be just another simple night in Porto das Araucarias, that coastal town where everyone knows everyone. Marcelo went for a walk with his daughter, Sofia, and decided to stop at a discreet roadside diner. But all it took was Sofia tugging at his shirt and pointing to the counter for the world to stop. There stood a woman serving coffee, and for a moment, it seemed like Renata had come back from the dead. Marcelo's heart raced, his legs weakened, and his mind began searching for logical explanations. Was it a cruel trick of longing? An absurd similarity? Or, could it really be her? But if so, where have you been all this time? And why have you never tried to come home? And so the question remains, what would you do if you suddenly saw the great love of your life, whom you thought was dead, alive and right in front of you? This is a story of loss, reunion, secrets, and overcoming that will show you that sometimes life holds revelations capable of changing everything in a single instant. Marcelo Vasconcelos always believed that life was made of small certainties. One of them was that Renata Duarte, his wife, would be by his side to weather any storm. But on that rainy winter night, everything fell apart. The car she was traveling in lost control on a treacherous curve on Estrada das Gavotas and overturned, catching fire before anyone could help her. When Marcelo received the news, it was as if the ground had opened up, swallowing not only the woman he loved but all his hope. The wake was quick, silent, and painful. The forensic team confirmed that the charred body found in the vehicle was Renata's. Friends and family tried to console Marcelo, but he knew no words could fill the void that had formed. Between tears and hugs, he embraced his 5-year-old daughter, Sofia, promising himself that he would do everything to protect her, even if he didn't know how to move on. Loss, grief, and the weight of loneliness became his inseparable companions. The following days were a suffocating mix of silence and memories. Every corner of the house seemed to scream Renata's absence. Her favorite cup still sat on the kitchen counter, and her perfume lingered on the clothes hanging in the closet. Marcelo found himself talking to himself, as if waiting for an answer that would never come. It was an unconscious ritual, a way of tricking his mind and, perhaps, delaying the recognition of the truth: she wouldn't return. The city of Porto das Araucarias, once full of life and color, seemed to have lost its luster for Marcelo. The conversations in the bakery, the sound of the sea crashing against the rocks, even the salty smell of the breeze, everything seemed heavier, colder. The morning wasn't just Renata's physical absence, but the feeling that the entire world had changed color. Still, deep in his chest, a spark of hope insisted on remaining lit, even if he couldn't explain why. On a cold Friday night, Marcelo decided to do something simple to distract Sofia. She'd been asking a lot about her mother, and he knew he didn't have easy answers. He got in his car and drove aimlessly, letting the low sound of the radio fill the silence. Along the coastal road, he spotted a small diner with yellowish lights blinking, as if beckoning for a break. The place seemed lost in time, with worn wooden tables and a sign that creaked in the wind. As soon as they parked, Sofia smiled and ran to the door, excited by the promise of a burger and fries. Marcelo, still enveloped by that melancholy air that had haunted him since his loss, simply followed in his daughter's footsteps. The doorbell rang as they entered, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with toast brought back forgotten memories of happy mornings with Renata. He sighed, trying to push the memories away and focus on the present moment. As Sofia flipped through the menu with childlike enthusiasm, something unusual happened. She tugged on her father's jacket sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, look." Her eyes fixed on the counter, where a waitress was serving a tray of coffee to a couple. Marcelo, distracted, only glanced quickly, but in an instant, his entire body seemed to freeze. The gesture, the hair, the way the woman smiled, everything was strangely familiar. Marcelo tried to hide it, but his heart was pounding so hard he could almost hear it inside his head. His palms began to sweat, and he swallowed hard, unsure whether to get up and go to her or simply ignore what he saw. After all, it wasn't possible. Renata was dead. And yet, the woman before him seemed to be exactly her. What was supposed to be a simple snack stop would end up changing the course of his life forever. Marcelo could no longer focus on anything around him. The voices in the diner seemed distant, as if the whole world were in slow motion. He watched the woman's every movement, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she tilted her head slightly when someone spoke. It was impossible to deny, this was the same Renata he had mourned 2 years ago. Every fiber of his being screamed that this was no coincidence. Filled with a mixture of fear and courage, he slowly stood up and walked toward the counter. With each step, his heart beat faster. When he finally got close, the waitress turned, and their eyes met. For a second, time stood still. Marcelo saw, there, the same deep gaze that had captivated him years ago, and with it, a flash of recognition. She let out a barely perceptible but emotion-laden sigh. "Renata?" Marcelo's voice was hoarse, almost a whisper. The woman blinked, quickly looked away, and, as if to escape the situation, began wiping the counter. But it was too late. That brief contact had already revealed everything. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and with a choked voice, replied, "Yes, it's me." Marcelo felt an electric shock run through his body. Everything he thought he knew about the last 2 years crumbled in an instant. There was no way to comprehend how she was there, alive, before him. But one certainty gripped his heart, nothing else mattered. He needed to know the truth, and he knew that from that moment on, his life would never be the same. Renata asked Marcelo to wait until the end of her shift. The air between them was thick, as if each breath were a step into a dangerous secret. When they finally stepped out onto the quiet street, she guided him to a bench in the small square behind the diner. There, in a low, trembling voice, she revealed that she had never died in that accident. In fact, what happened that night was far worse than any tragedy he could have imagined. Through tears and pauses, Renata explained that she was the victim of a planned kidnapping. Armed men took her from the car and forced her into another vehicle. To cover up the crime, they placed an unknown woman in her place, tied up and unconscious, and left her in the car, which was to be set on fire. The explosion was intentional, so that everyone would believe she was dead and so that no one would suspect their true intention, to blackmail Marcelo and destroy his family. For months, she was held captive in an isolated house in the mountains, constantly watched by 2 criminals. They forced her to assume a false identity, threatening to harm Sofia if she tried to escape. Each day was a struggle between fear and hope. Renata said she could only resist because she thought of her daughter and the silent promise to return to her. It was her form of protection, even from a distance. The opportunity to escape arose when one of the kidnappers was arrested for another crime, and his accomplice, frightened, let her escape. Since then, Renata had lived in hiding, working discreetly to avoid attention, fearing that those men would still find her. Now, faced with Marcelo, she knew she could no longer live on the run. It was time to face the truth, expose the criminals, and reclaim the life that had been stolen from her. Marcelo listened to every word Renata said as if piecing together a dark puzzle. Anger began to grow along with a sense of relief that she was alive. He realized he couldn't leave her alone for even a minute. He'd spent 2 years believing a cruel lie, and now he had the chance to make things right. It was time to act, not just for revenge, but to ensure her and Sofia's safety. The next morning, Marcelo sought out a trusted old friend, Gustavo Ferraz, a former private investigator who had helped with complicated cases in the past. He bluntly told the story and asked for help setting up a parallel investigation, away from the prying eyes of the city. Gustavo knew that dealing with criminals like this required extreme caution, but he also understood that Renata couldn't remain in hiding. The pair began meticulous work. They followed leads, revisited missing person records, analyzed old security camera footage, and cross-referenced names Marcelo had heard from Renata during her account. Every detail revealed that they were not dealing with common criminals, but with a well-organized network of extortion, money laundering, and kidnapping for hire. The risk was high, but retreat was no longer an option. With solid evidence in hand, Gustavo activated strategic contacts within the police. Within a few weeks, an operation was launched, resulting in the arrest of 3 men directly linked to the case, including the man responsible for holding Renata captive. For Marcelo, that moment meant not only justice, but the beginning of a new phase, rebuilding his family with the certainty that the danger was, at least for now, contained. 2 years of pain, uncertainty, and silence came to an end. When Renata finally walked through the door of her old house in Porto das Araucarias, the same one she had once left without warning, emotion overwhelmed her. Sofia, not quite grasping the scale of it all, ran into her mother's arms with a smile that seemed to light up every corner of the room. Marcelo stood watching, trying to commit every detail of the scene to memory, as if he wanted to keep it forever. The house seemed to breathe again. Sofia's laughter echoed through the hallways, mingling with the sound of conversations that stretched into the night. The feeling of security was slowly returning, though remnants of the fear that had haunted everyone for so long remained. Renata, now free, made a point of enjoying every second with her daughter, as if to make up for lost time. Marcelo, for his part, rediscovered the meaning of having his family together. It was no longer just about surviving grief, but about rebuilding bonds, cultivating true love, and protecting what mattered most. The bitter experiences had strengthened them all, creating a bond that nothing and no one could break. And so, after so many tears and trials, life returned to a more peaceful course. There were still wounds to heal, but the simple act of being together was, in itself, an act of overcoming. And, in Marcelo's heart, a silent vow was made: never again would fate, or any criminal, tear that family apart. Sometimes life takes away everything we love and leaves us believing we'll never smile again. But it can also restore what we thought was lost, showing that hope and courage can be stronger than fear. Marcelo and Renata lived a nightmare of loss, kidnapping, false identity, and fighting criminals, but they proved that, even in the darkest situations, true love and the protection of family can be a guiding light. What about you? Have you ever considered how many stories, secrets, and reunions might be hidden in the corners of your own life? Have you ever imagined that the breakthrough you so desperately seek could be just a step away? Perhaps the answer to your pain is closer than it seems, but it will only be found by those who have the courage to investigate, act, and believe. Life doesn't always give clear signs, but it always offers new opportunities. You just need to be alert and ready to seize them. So, if this story touched you, if it brought back memories, questions, or even a glimmer of hope, don't let this feeling pass you by. Subscribe to the channel now, turn on notifications, and continue following stories that will move, inspire, and show that, in the end, there's always a way to start over. Your next big revelation could be in the next video.